Hello, this is Stephen Nojiri, and this is part 2 of the Masashige Death series. So let's pick up right where we left off. So in the previous video, we discussed that the oldest versions of the Taiheki, the documents actually show that there's more recorded about Masashige sort of struggling with this suicide mission he was given. So let's pick up from there. So, however, Masashige is essentially stuck. So now what we're going to look at is the fact that why Masashige went along with this sort of suicide assignment. Masashige is essentially stuck. He will not AWOL his duty. In other words, he will not go absent without leave. He will not run away from his duty, nor will he change sides. See, at this point in time, a lot of the samurai are leaving Go-Daigo's service and they're changing sides to join Ashikaga. So Masashige has been given an order. He can either do the order, he can run away, or he can change sides. He refuses to run away and he refuses to change sides. He will not fight against the emperor. This only leaves him with one option. He has to fight. He doesn't have any choice but to remain true to his duty and follow his orders. But in the oldest documents, it's recorded he's not really happy about this. And this is ultimately why he stops at Sakurai and gives his long speech and long teaching and transmits his knowledge and authority to his sons and to many of the retainers who were there at the time. He knows he's going to die, and he still isn't really okay with just dying based on a bad decision. So he takes the time to make sure that everything is in order, and then he goes to meet up with Nita Yoshisada. He also tells everyone that Nita Yoshisada is certain to flee the battle early, and that when they see Nita flee, they will know that their death is impending, that the end game has begun. He also at this time orders a good chunk of his retainers to remain at Sakurai with his sons, to serve his sons after his death. Interestingly enough, we find that this matches the feeling of the account from the Baishoron. The Baishoron says that, now remember, the Baishoron is the Ashikaga's document. So you have the Taiheki and then you have the Baishoron. The Taiheki is being written. It's not written at one time. It's written over time. So a little bit is written, then it's edited. A little bit more is written, then it's edited. And it takes a long time for the full Taiheki to be sort of written and edited. While that's happening, the Ashikaga side produces their own document called the Baishoron. So the Baishoron, in that document, it says that Masashige suggests that Nita Yoshisada be executed for his incompetence, and that the southern court allow Ashikaga to be shogun. Because so many samurai have defected from Nita Yoshisada and joined Ashikaga, it seemed foolish to not simply hire Ashikaga back. So that is the strategy that Masashige presented. Get rid of Yoshisada and just simply hire Ashikaga back. Ashikaga is clearly favored by more. In other words, the majority of the samurai seem to favor Ashikaga. So just get rid of Nita Yoshisada, allow Ashikaga to be shogun, and just put an end to the war, like diplomatically, as opposed to armed conflict. However, this suggestion is ridiculed and tossed out by the southern generals, and Masashige is given the order to fight under Nita Yoshisada, or fight for Nita Yoshisada, which is a suicide mission. The Baishoron also records Masashige's displeasure and struggle to accept this. So the Baishoron and the oldest known Taiheki are both very clear that Masashige is very unhappy with this and he struggles to accept it. And although it doesn't match the oldest Taiheki in every detail, the gist or the feeling is pretty much the same. We can clearly see that these older documents record events much differently than the Rufuban version from the 1600s. So the Taiheki that most people are used to reading and studying Again, that's the Ruhuban version, and that version is reduced and simplified. If you look at documents like the Baishoron and the older Taihekis from the early 1400s, mid 1400s, they actually have this version of the story. Again, I would like to point out that Masashige's death is not recorded in the Jino Shotoki. It just says that Nita lost and Ashikaga takes Kyoto, but there's no mention of Masashige's death. It's Takita Batake in 1339. Masashige's death is not important enough to even mention. However, Masashige's death is given a big section in the Baishoron. So, we see the Ashikaga in the 1300s making a big deal of Kusunoki's death, but the southern generals aren't really paying it any attention at the time period, right? A couple years after his death. In the Baishoron, his sacrifice and bravery are praised. The Baishoron goes on to talk about how Ashikaga Takuuji cried when Masashige's head was presented to him, because Ashikaga realized that Masashige was now actually dead. The thing about that is that Masashige, prior to this, had several times in his various guerrilla campaigns where he would fake his death. And so when Ashikaga heard that Masashige had died at Minatogawa, he assumed that Kusunoki was still alive. But when they presented his head at the head viewing ceremony, Ashikaga began to cry because he realized that Masashige actually had died at Minatogawa. Returning Masashige's head to his family became a top priority. So at this point, I need to also point this out. The editing of the Taiheki was done by the Ashikaga. The edits of the first versions of the Taiheki were actually under the control of Ashikaga Tadayoshi. So during Ashikaga Tadayoshi's life, he was the person who was actually looking over the original sort of first volumes as they were being sort of written and pulled together. After Tadayoshi's life and through the 1300s, as more volumes were written and the Taiheki was pulled together into this massive 40-volume work, the Ashikaga retained control over the editing. Now, it's also important to know that Kusunoki Masashige's son Masanori became a huge figure in the southern court. So this is also another reason why Masashige's fame would have grown in the southern court later. But what I'm trying to say is this is why Masashige is famous after his death, is because his sons become very powerful within the southern court after his death. But also, there appears to be the Ashikaga brothers, Takuiji and Tadayoshi, have a great liking of Masashige, and since they are in control of editing the Taiheki, they are making a deal about Masashige, even though at the time the southern court would not make much of a deal about him until later when his son becomes well known.